have evolved over millions of years and outnumber all other creatures on Earth.
You cannot underestimate the force of these insects.
They can attack without warning and will often sacrifice themselves to ensure the survival of their species.
I don't think it's wise to stick around much longer.
While the armies of some can conquer a landscape, others will literally get under your skin.
It's a repulsive kind of thing when you pull this maggot out of somebody's body.
Although many possess a delicate beauty, millions of people have been left dead in their wake, victims of the insidious diseases they can spread. They fly, they crawl, they slither, they swarm, they sting, they bite, and they kill. They are deadly bugs. In a barren stretch of the Sonoran Desert outside of Tucson, Arizona, some of the world's most dangerous creatures can be found. Relentlessly, they have advanced into our popular culture, earning the nickname killer bees. In order to learn more about the behavior of these so-called killer bees, the United States Department of Agriculture is closely studying this aggressive hybrid.
See that we've got about 20 Africanized bee colonies scattered around the apiary. The reason we don't put them all together is that they can easily set each other off. It's like a nuclear reaction, a chain reaction, so you never want to have 4 or 5 Africanized bee colonies on the same stand. An Africanized bee is simply a race or a subspecies of the European honeybee. But unlike the European honeybee, Apis mellifera, this is a type of bee that evolved in Africa against the depredations of human honey hunters as well as honey badgers, and literally developed a defensiveness for people or animals coming in and attacking the colony. We keep them here to get them away from people, dogs, livestock, so they're not stung.
In 1956, killer bees were accidentally released from a research laboratory in Brazil. Their escape marked the beginning of an unrelenting and rapid migration north.
The bees moved at a rate of about 200 to 300 miles per year. They went through Brazil and all up through the Central American countries into Mexico. They literally broke out of Mexico and entered Texas in October of 1990. From there, they swung westward, going into New Mexico, finally reaching Arizona in 1993, and now they're literally knocking on the doorstep of San Diego and Los Angeles. You should never get this close to these bees. I'm going to tap on them and get some more bees out.
During the past 17 years, Dr. Stephen Buckman has witnessed firsthand just how little provocation it takes to set off a deadly attack by killer bees.
Pretty nasty attack. I'm glad that I'm duct tape in. It's a frightening experience to be inside a veil like this with hundreds of bees, and they're really pummeling me. They're hitting me with such force. See how they're still boiling out of the front of the colony.
With such a hair-trigger response, anyone unlucky enough to disturb a nest of Africanized bees would be overwhelmed by a stinging swarm in only a matter of seconds.
I think I've about had enough of this. I'm getting out of here. Really a pretty violent attack here, and I don't think it's wise to stick around much longer.
It's been estimated that since their release in 1956, Africanized honeybees have killed more than 2,000 people. The most lethal attacks occur after the nest has been disturbed. Such was the case in 1993, when a beekeeper in Peoria, Arizona, responded to a request to remove a beehive from a local home. The events from that afternoon have been recreated. From the safety of his living room, John Musselman watched in disbelief as the beekeeper was overwhelmed by a frenzied swarm of killer bees.
I could see his white suit, but not like the top part of it. The whole top part, his whole upper torso and his face was covered with bees.
Almost instantly, the beekeeper was forced to flee the scene. The angry bees were still swarming when John's wife, Gina, arrived home a few minutes later.
As soon as I drove into the driveway, I knew something was wrong, and the bees just swarmed my car. And you could hear them just clinking on the glass.
You know, I was banging on the window, I was yelling, I was doing everything to get her attention. I did not want her to get out of the car.
Fortunately, John's frantic warnings worked, and Gina drove away unharmed.
The bees followed my car. I mean, they stayed on my car until I got probably about a half mile away.
After Gina escaped, the bees attacked the neighbor's German Shepherd. Trapped in its backyard, the animal was helpless to defend itself against the relentless stinging of the frenzied swarm.
It was like a wild horse in a corral. He was like trying to get out of there, and I felt so bad for him.
A few hours later, one of Arizona's first documented killer bee attacks was over. 3 family pets were dead, all victims of the rampaging bees' lethal venom. Authorities can only imagine the tragedy that might have resulted had children been playing in the area that afternoon. Killer bees are here to stay, and experts agree that the best defense against attack is the ability to recognize the homes of these deadly insects and avoid them.
It's only at their nest, the hive, where you have tens of thousands of bees, that they're defensive. So you should be aware, especially for Africanized bees, that they like to nest low to the ground, 4 or 5 feet, or even in abandoned rodent burrows and that sort of thing in the ground.
And the old wise tale about standing still and they'll leave you alone isn't true anymore with these bees. They'll attack you. You need to run and find shelter.
Another lethal stinging insect, often confused with bees, is the wasp. But unlike the bee, who seeks out pollen as a food source, wasps are carnivorous, feeding almost exclusively on meat. Whether it's the western yellowjacket or the bald-faced hornet, both of these insects are commonly known as wasps.
They are major predators of other insects. They're strongly attracted to any sort of animal protein. So sort of the good that they do by, eating your garden pest is somewhat nullified by the bother they cause by trying to eat your barbecue chicken.
For those not allergic to wasp stings, an accidental run-in with this creature may simply be a painful nuisance. But for more than 500,000 people in the United States who have an extreme sensitivity to the venom, a close encounter with the stinger of this fierce insect could prove fatal.
Within 20 minutes, people that are going to have a full-blown allergic reaction will feel extremely disoriented and lightheaded. The usual cause of death is cardiac failure due to a drop in blood pressure.
You have a yellow jacket nest?
For the past 8 years, Jim DiGiulio has been helping Corvallis, Oregon residents solve their wasp problems.
In the ground.
Jim's the man they call when a nest needs to be removed. During the peak of wasp season, Jim often responds to more than 50 calls a week. On this particular day, Jim's first call takes him to an underground colony of western yellowjacket wasps. In order to safely extract the wasps from their subterranean nest, Jim uses a vacuuming device of his own design. The insects will be trapped unharmed in a 2-quart container.
There come a few, huh? This thing is pouring out yellow jackets. I don't know. I mean, very few are being missed. They're mostly going in, and this is just a big nest. You cannot underestimate the force of a yellow jacket nest. They range in number from 400 or 500 to 4,000 or 5,000 in a big nest. They're substantial colonies. When I've dug out big ground nests of people's homes, they're always just aghast at how truly large the thing is in there. Holy cow, look at this. That's a huge number. That's maybe 1,000 right there. They will remain alive in the bottle and basically unharmed long enough for me to put them in a cooler full of dry ice.
Jim does not charge for his services. He considers the insects he collects payment enough.
Really, within 2-3 minutes, they'll be out frozen.
After the insects are collected and put on ice, Jim sells the fresh frozen wasps to pharmaceutical companies that produce medicines used in venom immune therapy. Jim's second call takes him to the carport of a local home. Here, a colony of another species of wasp, bald-face hornets, have taken up residence. This nest, made of a paper-like substance produced by the insects themselves, must be dismantled before it can be removed from the ceiling. This procedure offers a rare, close-up view of the intricate and complex design inside the nest. The interior is teeming with life. These organisms are the next generation of the colony.
The white half domes that you see are pupal cells, and the ivory-colored animals next to that are fully grown larvae. You can see their mouths moving.
The insects Jim collected this day are frozen until they are ready to be shipped to the pharmaceutical lab.
Each nest is a baggie, and then each big bag is a species. And that's how they go out.
Once the frozen wasps arrive at the lab, their stingers are carefully removed. The minuscule venom sac is then separated and saved to produce venom-immune drugs.
It is truly a feel-good sort of job. I mean, people are happy when I show up because they have a problem they want to get rid of. I get money from the lab to supply them with yellow jackets, so I'm happy. The lab's happy because they're satisfying a need they have, and ultimately, people are being helped by this treatment who are at risk to die from these insects.
Careful with your footing here, guys.
In the dead of the night, 5 men move across the desert west of Tucson, Arizona. They are searching for a deadly bug, a creature that most of us would do anything to avoid. If we have to, most of us would prefer to confront these deadly creatures in the light of day. But these specialists actually prefer the cover of night.
Go ahead and turn that one on. Got him?
They know that under a black light, the bodies of scorpions will glow bright in the darkness of the desert.
The bark scorpion is the one that we focus the most attention on. The bark scorpion is the only of the 30 species that's been associated with life-threatening symptoms.
Fossilized records show that the scorpion's physical characteristics have changed little over millions of years. However, the species has managed to flourish in ever-changing environments.
Arizona Poison Control, may I help you?
Operators at the Arizona Poison and Drug Information Center field an average of 50 calls a week from people unfortunate enough to encounter these lethal stingers.
Last year, we responded to over 2,500 scorpion stings. One of the reasons why we see so many scorpion stings is that we've chosen to move out into areas that were formerly scorpion habitat. At this home, we have a good example of how we come in contact with scorpions. This bark scorpion, we can tell it's that because it's a climbing species, is making his way up the side of the house. Scorpions that find their way inside our home are not necessarily happy scorpions. Generally, they won't find the food supply that they would normally find outside. So they're wandering around our home quite frequently at night in dark rooms. If we leave our clothing down at night or our shoes out, come the daylight hours, the scorpion is looking for a dark crack or crevice. And of course, when we put our clothing back on, we trap the scorpion. And as a defensive act, it will sting us.
The venom a scorpion produces is stored in the tip of its tail. It delivers its poisonous injection through a needle-like stinger called a telson. This prosthetic finger shows just how quickly a bark scorpion can strike its victim.
The sting of a bark scorpion's been described to us as being stuck with a hot poker, and then kind of an electrical, tingling type sensation that travels from the site of the sting, usually in a direction toward the heart. Very severe symptoms would include muscle twitching, blurred vision, any kind of shortness of breath.
The human body's reaction to the venom of a bark scorpion can range from mild nausea and numbness to violent muscle spasms and respiratory failure. Children under the age of 5 are at the greatest risk.
A young child gets a comparatively larger dose when we compare it to the body size of a larger adult getting the same dose.
Thanks to modern medical care, there hasn't been a scorpion-related death in Arizona since 1968.
This is the giant hairy scorpion, and despite his...
In an effort to help future victims of scorpion stings, Jude McNally and his colleagues are studying the toxic properties of scorpion venom.
One of the things that we're looking at now is the possibility that even amongst the same species of scorpion, there may be venom differences between individual scorpions. So currently we're milking the scorpions to see if in fact they all have the same neurologic or neurotoxic poison. It's a very fine capillary tube.
After positioning a slender glass tube over the stinger, a low-voltage charge is applied to the scorpion's telson. This causes it to discharge its venom, which is then collected in the glass tube. To ensure the ample supply of scorpion venom, McNally and his colleagues routinely trek into the desert in search of wild scorpions.
There's one.
Yeah,
Let me
here.
get the lid open here. Hang on.
Let me take that. We can find scorpions all over the Sonora Desert, throughout Arizona, literally in all habitats.
Despite the systematic elimination of their natural environment, all indications are that these highly resilient creatures will continue to thrive, just as they have for millions of years. Another breed of bug that has been around since the dawn of time is ants. These common backyard pests are actually the wingless descendants of prehistoric wasps. To many of us, ants are nothing more than a harmless nuisance. But with one species in the southwest United States, that assumption could cost you your life. The South American fire ant, aptly named for the painful burning sensation of its sting, attacks its victims in swarming hordes.
When a fire ant nest is disturbed, the first thing they do is run up the individual's legs and attach themselves with their mandibles, and then start stinging. The general reaction to fire ant sting is a burning sensation and then a small red bump, and then about 24 hours later, we have a pustule that forms, and if left alone, the pustule will disappear in 2 to 3 days. However, if the pustule is scratched, then secondary infection can set in.
In cases where the victim is allergic to the fire ant's venom, merely a few stings can cause total respiratory failure.
About 1% of the people in the southern United States are allergic to fire ant stings. If they are stung by a fire ant, this is a life-threatening situation in which they should get to an emergency room as soon as possible.
In the 1930s, these tiny terrors were unknowingly imported into the United States amid cargo shipments of agricultural products. Removed from its native habitat, and with no natural enemies to control its population, this aggressive species quickly dominated its new home.
Fire ants are very aggressive. They're also highly reproductive. The queens produce 2,000 eggs in 24 hours. Their colonies are much larger than the native ant species. It has pushed out or reduced the numbers of our native insects, native rodents, native spiders, and because of this, it has a detrimental impact on the ecology of these areas.
In less than 60 years, this highly adaptable creature has expanded its territory, covering more than 280 million acres of the United States, and it shows no signs of slowing down.
We should worry because they will be moving further west, further north, and of course they are an aggressive ant, and humans will be coming in contact with them more and more.
While chemical pesticides provide some hope of slowing the fire ant invasion, there is another species of ant which etymologists agree must never be released within U.S. borders. Behind these locked doors, under strict security, is an insect with a sting so painful it has been dubbed the bullet ant.
A bullet ant is a large ant that lives in Central and South America. By large, I mean about an inch long. The name bullet ant, I think it reflects the fact that the pain is analogous to being shot by a bullet. Now, I've never been shot by a bullet, so I can't make that comparison, but I have been stung by a bullet ant, and it is excruciatingly painful.
Though this giant species is 100 times the size of a common domestic ant, it has a social order similar to its smaller counterpart.
We're looking at an intimate view inside of a bullet ant nest. This is home. This is where the queen is, the mother of the colony that's laying the eggs. And all these ants you see in here are workers. They're daughters of the queen. And all her daughters are helping her raise these eggs. Once they hatch, they turn into these white grub-like larvae.
The larvae have one main purpose: to eat and grow. It is the job of the worker ants to provide a constant supply of food. Drops of nectar are collected by the workers and carried in their mandibles to be given to the larvae. Solid food is another matter. It is first eaten by the ants, partially digested, then regurgitated directly into the mouths of the larvae. When fully grown, the larvae spin silken cocoons.
Inside the cocoon, there's metamorphosis occurs. The larva transforms to the adult stage, and when it's ready to emerge, the other ants help groom the young worker, and then after a few days, it also starts to help with colony tasks.
One of the most important occupants of the nest is the queen. If she is threatened, the colony responds with ferocity.
They're highly defensive. When you're talking about the nest where there could be several thousand or more bullet ants and you disturb that nest, they're going to come swarming out in mass, making their warning noise, and grabbing and impaling and stinging anything that doesn't smell like them. Typically, a sting from a bullet ant or even a couple of bullet ants is just going to be a painful, miserable experience, but not be life-threatening. Usually there's an immediate burning sensation, perhaps like you've been impaled by a red-hot nail. If you were stung on the hand, for example, the pain would gradually extend up to the shoulder. It might get to a point where you could lose the use of your arm for a couple hours. But if you were stung many, many, many times, it could kill you.
No one knows whether the bullet ant could wreak the environmental havoc already credited to its cousin, the fire ant. But biologists agree that because of its tremendous size and potent sting, this giant of the ant world is best kept behind locked doors. For the better part of his life, Dr. Robert Hancock of Cumberland College in Kentucky has studied one of the most deadly organisms known to man. Every time Dr. Hancock stalks his subject, he knows just how dangerous this beautifully delicate creature can be.
I see all those people out there pointing their elaborate photographic equipment at birds or lions or sharks. And I realize that those organisms are important and interesting to people. But there's not many of us out there pointing our lenses at mosquitoes.
The mosquito has killed more people than any other insect on Earth. By feeding on human and animal blood, this tiny creature has spread deadly viruses and diseases throughout the world. The mosquito is an insect that belongs to the order of Diptera, which means having two wings, a close cousin of the horsefly, deerfly, and common housefly. There are over 100 species of mosquitoes in North America alone.
But we've got good action here, oh yeah.
Although both male and female mosquitoes consume nectar as a food source, it is only the female who feeds on blood. She does this for the express purpose of bringing new life to the species.
Each one of these blood meals that these females are taking, and some of them are getting quite full, is capable of providing them with enough protein, enough raw materials to manufacture anywhere from perhaps 60 to upwards of low 100s of eggs from this feeding activity.
Within 3 days, the female mosquito must find a safe place to deposit her eggs.
Different kinds of mosquitoes lay different kinds of eggs. Some of them lay individual eggs in moist substrate in areas that will be flooded. Others put their eggs into these elaborate rafts.
In this aquatic environment, the offspring enter their second phase of development, known as the larval stage. These immature organisms eat protozoa and algae. From there, they emerge as active pupa, moving constantly to avoid being eaten by hungry birds or fish.
And out of this pupa, the mosquito crawls out onto the surface of the water and then within hours or sometimes even minutes takes flight. And then we have the common mosquito that all of us are so familiar with.
This tiny insect has killed more human beings than all the bears, tigers, and lions throughout history. Millions have lost their lives, not directly from the mosquito itself, but from the deadly diseases it passes from one individual to another.
One of the most famous diseases that mosquitoes have transmitted to man through the years has been yellow fever. It actually caused cessation of the building of the Panama Canal for many years until they figured out how to control the mosquitoes.
Perhaps the most dreaded disease transmitted by mosquitoes is malaria. Once the human body is infected with this parasite, body temperatures can skyrocket as high as 108 degrees. This potentially fatal fever is often accompanied by paroxysms, violent tremors and shaking of the body.
You may suffer these paroxysms for upwards of 30 hours. And if that's not enough, your body will have another day to recover, and then another cycle will start. And the people who die of this disease die of sheer exhaustion.
This terrifying disease is spread when female mosquitoes feed. She extracts blood by inserting a tube-like structure into the skin. As the mosquito drills down, she injects the wound with her saliva. This substance both dilates the blood vessels and serves as an anticoagulant to help the blood flow more freely. But like dirty needles which can spread infection, it is the mosquito's feeding tube which is responsible for passing the disease. Despite their lethal nature, Robert Hancock finds a certain kind of beauty in this most deadly bug.
I've had a long affair with a species of mosquitoes that is found in Panama and other places in Central America and even South America. It's gorgeous with metallic blue scales and metallic silver scales that line its upper and lower surfaces respectively. It also has these huge paddles that branch out. Their numbers are so low that if you're walking in the forests of Panama, for instance, that you'd be lucky to be bitten by one of these mosquitoes in a 2-day period, unless you know where to find them. So they certainly aren't a nuisance. I'll actually take time to feed them just to make sure that more of them can come out there because they're so beautiful. It's kind of, I guess, a love-hate relationship with the mosquito that we have, in that we're fascinated by their biology and the way they do things. We also hate mosquitoes worldwide because of the diseases that they transmit.
There is another bloodsucker that is responsible for spreading diseases such as Rocky Mountain spotted fever. It is an 8-legged ectoparasite that feeds exclusively on animal and human blood. Although there are nearly 100 tick species throughout the United States, only one kind, the deer tick, is responsible for infecting thousands of people with a debilitating disease, an affliction that went undetected for more than 4 decades. It all began in 1959 in the picturesque village of Lyme, Connecticut. Artist Polly Murray and members of her family began suffering from a mysterious illness.
I started having strange symptoms when we moved to Connecticut. Unexplained virus-like illness, high fever, joint problems, and headaches. And over a period of years, they continued to plague me, and I never could find out what was the matter. And others in the family started having these same kinds of symptoms.
By 1975, the same persistent symptoms that had plagued Polly's family for years had become prevalent throughout the community of Lyme.
It got really kind of frantic. We couldn't pin down what was the matter, but we kept getting recurrently sick, and finally decided to call the State Health Department in Hartford and report that there seemed to be a problem in our area.
After an intensive investigation, government health officials discovered that all the victims of the illness shared one characteristic. Each had been infected by a bacteria transmitted by deer ticks. It was the case of one patient that enabled doctors to trace the bacteria to the tick.
A man came into the clinic for treatment, and he had not taken the tick off the way he, probably should have in the beginning, but he still had the tick in the center of the rash, and this was the proof that they needed, definitively, that this was the cause.
Investigators named the newly discovered affliction Lyme disease.
This is the tick species associated with Lyme disease. This is the adult female, and the adult males and females are abundant from November through about April, or possibly into early and mid-May. Humans come in contact with ticks in various ways. One is obvious, and that is they will go out into a forested setting and walk along a trail or come in contact with some vegetation and have ticks on the tips of the blades of grass or other forms of vegetation. The tick will crawl onto the host, and then it will move up and find a skin surface to embed its mouth parts. Then the tick will begin sucking the blood and actually be attached to the host for a number of days.
Left undisturbed, the tick will engorge itself with blood, then detach from its host. If the tick is a carrier of the Lyme disease bacteria, symptoms will soon appear.
Usually, people within 2 or 30 days after the tick bite will develop a large red skin lesion at the site of that tick bite. Some people have no further problems from that point. Other people may progress into cardiac and neurological problems. The later stages of Lyme disease, there can be recurrent bouts of arthritis, usually the major joints. So Lyme disease as we know it today is really a complex of many different disorders.
Although it is not fatal, if left untreated, the effects of Lyme disease can be debilitating. While antibiotics can be effective in treating the early stages of the disease, most doctors agree that the best method of prevention continues to be the early and immediate removal of any ticks.
You can't let it ruin your life. And I've, continued to garden, and I continue to be outdoors as much as I can. But I also am very careful about, checking myself in a mirror at night, trying to make sure I don't have any ticks on me. But even then, you can miss them, and you have to just keep periodically looking at your body for these ticks.
Two of perhaps the most insidious and feared bugs in the world share one thing in common. They feed on humans, but each in a very different way. Dr. Paul Katz, head of the etymology department at Washington State University, has spent the better part of his career studying these strange creatures. One insect Katz finds particularly interesting has reproductive rituals that are among the most bizarre of the insect world.
The so-called human botfly locates a potential host, and she will land on the side of that host and wait for another fly or a mosquito to come in to feed on that host. As that mosquito approaches, the human botfly flies out and captures it in midair and then tumbles with this, and while they're tumbling, she lays 8, 9, 10 eggs on the abdomen of that mosquito and then releases it.
When the egg-infested mosquito feeds a few days later, the body heat from its victim causes the botfly eggs to hatch. Tiny larvae drop onto the new host and burrow into the skin.
After the human botfly larva penetrates into the skin, it begins to create an ulcer-like sore by feeding on connective tissue of the host. It has mouth hooks. It's like a pair of fangs, sort of, and they scratch away at this tissue, and then the larva, as it's scratching away, it's twisting around, so it is squirming as well while it's taking in this food. Now, when it reaches a size of about an almond, then it is ready to begin to back out. It's going to back out and drop to the ground. This fly attacks a wide range of hosts, and included in that range of hosts are people. So that's why it's been called the human botfly.
But as knowledgeable as Dr. Katz is about the life cycle of the human botfly, he isn't nearly as intimately acquainted as one of his friends and fellow entomologists, Dr. Charles O'Brien.
My research is associated with weevils. So I travel to South America, or I go to China, or I go to India or Australia to try to collect these insects.
In the spring of 1994, Dr. O'Brien spent several weeks in the jungles of South America gathering specimens for his research. Shortly after returning home, he became suspicious of a wound on his arm that was slow to heal.
I woke up in the morning at about 4, and something was hurting in my arm. And I got surprised about that and thought, well, maybe this is a clue that there's something in there. So I decided to clean the wound up a little bit and put my arm under the scope, and then I saw the two black spiracles waving in the air as it was breathing. I could feel it as it would turn around inside the hole in the arm.
So how do I get this botfly out, Doc?
The fact that the physician who examined Charlie was not familiar with human botfly is not surprising, because we do not have the human botfly native to North America. And so when he saw this thing, it's a repulsive kind of thing. When you pull this maggot out of somebody's skin, he was surprised by it.
By the time the larva was removed from Charlie's arm, it had grown to nearly an inch long.
Nasty-looking critter, huh?
As repulsive and unsettling as playing host to a botfly larva may be, it can't compare to the tragic long-term effects of a close encounter with South America's kissing bug. Nocturnal by nature, this bug sucks blood from its victims while they sleep.
The kissing bug feed on a wide range of different kinds of hosts, particularly on people. They're called kissing bugs, incidentally, because they will often feed around the corners of the mouth. They are attracted by heat and by carbon dioxide that the hosts emit. And once this host becomes dormant, sleeping, they are fair game for these bugs. They have a beak-like biting apparatus, or piercing, sucking apparatus. And this is swung out so that it's almost bayonet fashion as they approach the host. And then they walk up onto the host and they will begin to feed by piercing the skin and feeding on blood. These bugs are the carriers of a disease agent that is known as American trypanosomiasis, or commonly called Chagas disease. Chagas disease is one of the 3 major diseases of Central and South America, and it is because of these bugs.
It is not the kissing bug's bite that is deadly, but rather a microscopic parasite that is sometimes found in the fecal matter.
When it is feeding, it defecates on the surface of the skin, and the person scratches this or rubs this fecal material into the open wound that is left by the feeding site. And that's how this disease agent gains entry into the human body.
Once in the bloodstream, the parasite invades the heart, where it multiplies.
The heart tissue then becomes infected with large numbers of these parasites, and they will eventually cause heart failure.
In many cases, it takes years before any symptoms of Chagas disease are detected. Oddly enough, it is the kissing bug that doctors use in order to diagnose the condition.
What they do is take some bugs that are clean, don't have the disease agent, and they let them feed upon a patient who they suspect may have Chagas disease.
If the patient is infected, the parasite that causes Chagas will be present in the fecal matter of the kissing bugs.
What you're using is the bug actually as an instrument to magnify the agent that was in the circulating blood of the adult.
Once diagnosed, the only treatment for Chagas is a heart transplant. While this can extend the life of victims, it can never rid them of the disease. To date, there is no known cure for this slow and silent killer, which currently affects more than 1 million people worldwide. Perhaps the most feared bugs in the world are spiders. Hailing from the arachnid family, these 8-legged creatures creep, crawl, and make people cringe. And while most are harmless, there are a few deadly exceptions, most notably the black widow.
Although the widow spiders are found throughout the world, it is only in this country that they have the name the black widow. In Australia, they're known as redbacks. In South Africa, they are known as shoe button spiders.
The black widow is a member of the violin family of spiders. The female of the species, 3 times the size of the male, is easily recognized by her large black body and the distinctive red hourglass markings on her belly.
They got their name, Black Widow, because of the false belief that every time the female mates, that she kills the male afterward. Studies have shown that females typically kill the males if they are hungry. If they are not hungry, the male escapes to mate again. I've been working with black widow spiders for 20 years. I've been handling them. I know how to do this. They are very dangerous creatures. Don't try this at home. They can kill.
Rick Vedder's research work with black widows has given him a certain confidence when handling these deadly creatures, a confidence few of us possess.
Black widow spiders are not at all aggressive. They're incredibly timid. Get back here. They run away at the first incidence of larger creature near them. And in fact, when I try to catch them, I have to be very quick to be able to grab them without them scooting away.
But if cornered and given no choice, the black widow will defend herself.
Typically, the bite of a black widow is not something you feel. It's somewhat of a pinprick. Within about an hour or so, the venom starts to take effect. You may start to have rigid stomach muscles and then localized sweating. Within about 8 hours or so, the pain becomes tremendous, and then you usually seek medical attention. Years ago, before they had anti-venom, they seemed to kill about 5% of the people that they bit. Nowadays, there are enough medical treatments for black widow bite that they just cause pain and discomfort, and typically people can be treated for it. Okay, well, it's nighttime now, and the black widows are coming out in full force. You can see there's a nice female right there.
Although found throughout the world, in the U.S., black widows are most common in the south and western regions. And Rick knows just what kind of environment these deadly creatures like to call home.
Black widows are found most often in remote areas, rocky outcroppings, under trash, in old buildings. Here's a black widow web. You might be able to hear how much noise it makes when we rip it.
The silken threads of the black widow web are so strong that they were used for crosshairs and rifle sights during World War II.
Not many spiders make a web that strong. Here's a nice big black widow, real good specimen, nice hourglass right there. Black widow spiders like to build their web close to the ground so they can pick up things like crickets and other crawling creatures. See if we can get it going the other way. Oh, there she goes. Black widows do serve a function in this world. Just like any spider, they are predators and they do pick off insect prey, so they are serving a decent function. But then again, they do pose a threat because they are venomous, and most people will want to kill them and get rid of them, but I have a tendency to like to have them around. That's it.
Though he has a fondness for his beloved black widow, there is one spider that even Rick fears.
In the United States, we have black widow spiders, recluse spiders, and we also have in the Pacific Northwest the hobo spider. But none of these are nearly as deadly or dangerous as the Sydney funnelweb.
Native to Australia's eastern coast, the Sydney funnelweb spider is ounce for ounce the world's deadliest bug. With a bite that can kill an adult human in less than an hour, this easily provoked creature is perhaps the most aggressive spider in the world. The delivery instruments of the funnelweb spider's deadly venom are 2 spring-loaded fangs capable of penetrating a leather boot.
The larger specimens, the fangs can be almost 1/4 inch long, and they have to open downwards and strike down like daggers. So the animal has to rear up to release those fangs and strike downwards.
Once bitten, victims have only a few minutes before they begin to feel the effects of the spider's highly toxic venom.
The Funnelweb venom travels fairly quickly, and so what you get is this twitching paralysis. The muscles of the patient are twitching and sometimes quite violently. Eventually, the patient slips into a coma, and it affects breathing centres, and the patient eventually dies from asphyxiation.
For decades, Australians lived in constant fear of these deadly creatures. But in 1981, after 14 years of research, an anti-venom was finally created, saving hundreds of lives. From the lethal bite of the funnelweb spider to the deadly stings of killer bees, all of these bugs pose a genuine threat to mankind. However, they are also among the oldest life forms on Earth, and their ability to survive and adapt in a world dominated by humans is nothing short of remarkable. And while some of us would have these deadly bugs eradicated from the face of the Earth, there is no doubt each of these creatures plays a unique role in nature's continuing drama of life and death.